All right, so today we're diving into something kind of wild.
Okay.
How do you actually measure, like, something intangible?
Okay.
You know, like that feeling you get walking into, like, a really swanky restaurant
Yeah.
versus just grabbing a quick burger?
Right.
We've got some fascinating research, actually,
Yeah.
from the International Journal of Consumer Studies on this very topic.
Cool.
And trust me, they found a way to measure the seemingly immeasurable.
It's a challenge researchers have been wrestling with for quite a while,
Right.
especially in service industries where so much of what we experience goes beyond just the tangible stuff.
And this study really zeroes in on what they call mental intangibility,
Right.
or MI for short.
Yeah.
Before we get into, like, the how of measuring it,
Sure.
could you break down, like, what MI actually
Yeah.
is and why it even matters in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in a nutshell, MI refers to the aspects of a service that are really hard to grasp until you actually experience them firsthand.
Okay.
So think of it like the feeling component, like
Okay.
the ambiance, the sense of risk you might perceive, the uncertainty of what to expect.
Got it.
It goes way beyond like the physical environment or the actual service being provided.
Okay, so it's like I can tell you the menu
Right.
at that fancy restaurant.
Exactly.
I can describe the decor,
Yep.
but I can't really convey, like, that air of sophistication, you know,
Right.
that possibility of, like, a will they, won't they plot unfolding at the table next to you.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why it matters, because MI really influences our perceptions
Okay.
and ultimately our choices.
Yeah.
It can be exciting, intimidating,
Right.
or even like influence whether we feel like something is worth the risk or the cost.
Right. Like, is that fancy restaurant actually worth the price tag?
Exactly. And businesses totally get this. That's
Yeah.
why they put so much effort into crafting these specific atmospheres and experiences. They want to tap into that mental intangibility.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But how on earth do you measure something so subjective?
Right.
Like, even picturing it is kind of tough.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And, the researchers actually point out that all those traditional methods,
Okay.
like those agree-disagree surveys we see all the time,
Yeah.
those don't really cut it for this.
Interesting.
Because people interpret those scales so differently
Oh, okay.
based on their own internal benchmarks, So just comparing those responses directly
Yeah.
gets really messy really fast.
So it's like trying to measure something
Right.
when everyone's using, like, a different size ruler.
Exactly.
It's never going to be accurate.
But it just doesn't work.
So what did these researchers do differently?
That's the really interesting part.
So if traditional surveys are out the window, what's the secret weapon here?
Well, they ditched the ratings altogether.
Okay.
And they went for choices instead.
Choices.
They
Weapon.
used something called a discrete choice experiment,
Right?
or DCE,
DCE. All right.
which is really fascinating stuff.
The choice experiment.
Yeah.
Okay, so walk me through this. How does that work?
Okay, so picture this.
Okay.
Instead of asking someone to rate the level of mental intangibility on like a scale of 1 to 5,
Right.
you present them with 2 scenarios
Okay.
and ask them to choose which one feels more intangible.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
So, like, using our restaurant example, be like,
Yeah.
which one takes longer to form a clear picture in your mind? The
Exactly.
fancy restaurant or the fast food joint?
Yes, exactly. That's a great example.
Okay.
So by forcing a choice between those 2 options,
Right.
the researchers could kind of sidestep that whole issue we talked about
Right.
of like individual interpretation of scales.
Because everybody's got their own system.
Everyone's got their own ruler in their head,
Yeah.
and the results were really impressive
Okay.
across 4 different studies,
Wow.
even with different cultural contexts. Like they tested this in India,
Oh,
the
wow.
UAE, Italy. The DCE consistently captured those subtle differences in mental intangibility.
Huh. So it actually, like, worked.
It really did.
That's wild.
It's a really elegant solution when you think about it.
Yeah, it kind of cuts through all the noise
Exactly.
and just lets the choices speak for themselves.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it.
So I have to ask,
Yeah.
why should, like, our listener care about this whole DCE thing?
Right.
It's not like we're all out here measuring mental intangibility on a daily basis.
Well, you might be surprised.
Okay.
Because the beauty of the DCE method is that it can be applied to all sorts of situations
Okay.
where you're dealing with these subjective or difficult to pin down concepts.
Okay.
It's not limited to, just fancy restaurants and service industries.
Give me an example then.
Okay.
I'm intrigued.
Let's say you're prepping for a big presentation,
Okay. Love those.
which I know you do a lot of.
All the time.
You want to know which set of slides is going to resonate better with your audience.
Right.
One that's very straightforward bullet points, very clear,
Sure.
or one that's got more like visuals, metaphors, that kind of thing.
Right. Okay, I see where you're going with this.
You could totally use the DCE method.
Really?
Yeah.
How?
You could show both versions to a sample audience
Okay.
and just ask a simple question.
Okay.
Which version do you think would take longer for the average person to grasp?
Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
And their answers would actually give you real insight
Okay.
into how your message is likely to land.
So it's like hacking into their subconscious
Exactly.
decision-making process.
Yes.
You're not asking them to rate it.
Yes, right.
We're observing their natural inclination
Precisely.
toward one option or the other.
That's the beauty of it.
That's really cool.
And this can be applied to so many things.
Yeah.
Testing marketing campaigns.
Right.
Understanding how people interpret complex information.
Yeah.
Even just designing user experiences for websites or apps.
It's amazing to me, like, how much power
I know.
those seemingly small choices actually hold.
Yeah.
They reveal so much about, like, what resonates with us, often without us even realizing it.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, what makes this whole research so compelling. It gives
Yeah.
us this new way to decode those choices.
Right.
To understand the why behind the what.
Totally. And for a data nerd like me, this DCE method just opens up a whole new world.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like all these possibilities.
Yeah, endless possibilities.
So before we wrap this up,
Sure.
what's like your biggest takeaway from all this?
Oh, that's a good question.
What's the one thing you really hope our listeners walk away with today?
For me, it really comes back to this idea
Okay.
that there's so much more to our decisions than we realize.
Right.
Even those small, almost like instinctual choices we make.
Yeah, like I'm gonna have a burger today.
Exactly. Those
Yeah.
are still telling a story.
Interesting.
They're shaped by our perceptions, by our emotions, by
Okay.
all those intangible factors we've been talking about.
So it's like each choice is like this little data point.
Yeah.
This little clue to understanding how we see and experience everything around us.
Precisely.
Whoa.
And I think that's a pretty profound thought to end on.
It really is.
Right.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about, that's for sure.
Yeah, me too.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive
It has.
into the world of the intangible.
So cool.
Thanks to everyone for joining us, and may your choices be insightful
Here.
and your experiences unforgettable.